Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 38.
Episode 38. You know what's really interesting about 38, Ben?
Tell me.
The 38th parallel. Do you, like, off the top of your head, you know what that is, of course.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of notorious as the boundary between North and South Korea.
Now, here's the question, though. Do you know why that is the boundary between North and South Korea?
I kind of know. I mean, they fought back and forth and had to settle on something, and they picked it, but I don't really know why.
So here's the thing. What happened was that the Korean Peninsula was occupied by Japanese troops at the end of World War II. And at the Potsdam Conference, which is where Britain, the U.S., and Russia sat down and basically carved the world up into little pieces for everybody to control.
That sounds so pretentious.
That's exactly what happened. Read your history. Like, all of the 20th century can be defined by what happened at the Potsdam Conference. But we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is that the U.S. and the Russians struck a deal of convenience, where it's like, you know what? You guys, you have troops there. We have troops there. Let's just draw a line somewhere in the middle of the peninsula. You take the surrenders of the Japanese troops north of this line. We'll take surrenders of the Japanese troops south of the line. Then
when I said pretentious, I didn't mean I doubted you. I meant that, you know, a bunch of white guys 6,000 miles away were carving up the Korean peninsula.
Well, they also carved up, like, the Middle East and Germany, and, like, they carved up everything.
Was that when Israel was made?
That is when Israel was made.
Huh.
They felt, I might be paraphrasing, and my facts might not be 100% straight, but the too long didn't read was they all felt bad that all of the Jews were suffered in the Holocaust, and they carved out a country for them in a country where people already lived, which caused some tensions.
I get your disclaimer, but don't worry. We've already committed several times the sin of being wrong on the internet here on the Bad at Magic podcast. So
yeah, listeners, if I got it wrong, don't at me. I already said I probably got it wrong.
I gave the false information disclaimer.
Anywho, the Russians and the U.S. made a convenient split for honestly just utility. Like, it's going to be easy if we just draw a line somewhere, and then you take that half, I'll take this half. But then the Cold War happened, and people settled in. North Korea became communist. South Korea became democratic. Then the Korean War kicked off in like the 1950s, and there was fighting back and forth. And they, for some reason, like, it stalemated right around the 38th parallel. And then once the ceasefire was called, they demilitarized it, and it has been there ever since. Like, it's almost just one of those things that has been ongoing because of tradition, if nothing else.
Yeah, I don't know what the world would be like without it. You can see it from space now. They've made movies about it. I remember one of the Pierce Brosnan and James Bond movies. He crossed it in a hovercraft.
Which is every movie where I've seen the 38th parallel is just ridiculous.
Yeah, well, this isn't one of those life is stranger than fiction. You know, Donald Trump set the distinction of being the first president ever to cross it on foot.
Hooray! Like, I don't know how to respond.
All right. Well, last time we talked about a few things relating to culture in the 80s, and because of that, we spent a little bit of time talking about Kevin Smith, who grew up in the 80s and is a big consumer of that kind of culture. And I ended up going down a rabbit hole where I was just like, he's a prolific producer of content on the internet, similar to Joe Rogan, if you're familiar with that, where he just has like a podcast and he does all kinds of things. You know, Kevin Smith does like a lecture series at colleges, and he creates lots of things. So, you know, in addition to being like a filmmaker and director and actor, he's also just a fan. And he's a very talented storyteller. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, just go check out his YouTube channel. I went down the rabbit hole, and I realized he said something really interesting that was similar to what we learned last time about director John Hughes. You know, when John Hughes started making movies, he decided that he wanted to kind of have them all set in this fictional town on the north side of Chicago, Schermberger, Illinois, or whatever it was called.
Shermer, Illinois.
Shermer, which isn't a real place.
It is not a real place.
There's a street in Northbrook called Shermer, but yeah, it's not a real place. Anyway, Kevin Smith kind of latched his mind onto this idea, and he's like, you know, I have all these ideas for movies. Why should they exist in separate universes that aren't aware of each other? So he decided every movie he'd make would be in the same universe. So Clerks, Mallrats, Jay and Silent Bob, all those movies are in the same universe, and he'll have his characters from his other movies do cameos in whatever movie he's making now.
That's a thing that happened throughout the 80s, too. Like, this is, I mean, yeah, it's a cool idea, but it's not necessarily a new idea.
Yeah.
I'll never forget there was the two old guys in that movie, Trading Places. The two, they were the antagonists, and they set the bet. And like,
it was played by Dan Aykroyd and... Oh, no. Okay, I know what you're talking about. The two older gentlemen.
The two older gentlemen. Well, at the end of the movie, they lose all their money and they become poor. And it's a...
Yeah, they get their comeuppance.
Yeah, they get their comeuppance. But then another movie from the 80s, Coming to America, the prince is walking down the street and has this big bag of money for some reason. And he just throws it at these two bums sitting on the street. And it's the two same actors, same old guys.
Yeah.
And they even reference each other by name. He goes, Mortimer, we're back. And then that's it. And then we never see them again. But still, same universe.
Okay. So it was the inside joke you'd only get if you'd also seen the other movie.
Right. Oh, and another example, off the top of my head. Man, I've got so many of these. There was a movie, Twins, with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And Danny DeVito.
And Danny DeVito. There is a scene where Arnold Schwarzenegger is walking down Hollywood Boulevard or something, and there's a movie poster for Rambo with Sylvester Stallone. Uh-huh. And for people that aren't aware, Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger had this huge rivalry back when they were making movies together. And like Rambo posters, like holding the M60 with his shirt off, he's got his arm showing and all that. And then Arnold looks at it for a second, and then he flexes his bicep, and then he like laughs mockingly, and then walks on. And then that's the only reference ever is to it.
Yeah, those are good. Those little Easter eggs like that. You can overdo it. I mean, what was it? Ocean's 12. I mean, that was a really bad example of that where you just overdo it. But I digress.
Let's not talk about Ocean's 12.
Okay, so two other facts about Kevin Smith. He cast Chris Hemsworth back in the day before he was even a thing, and quote unquote discovered him. There was an interesting story about that. But something I didn't know is I'd seen photos of Kevin Smith recently, and I almost didn't recognize him. Because he was notorious for wearing jorts and just being a big fat guy and stuff. And apparently in 2018, he suffered a heart attack that if he hadn't gotten immediate medical attention would have ended his life at age 48 or whatever he is. They call it a widowmaker. There's some valve, some vein on that or artery on the outside of your heart, and it was 100% blocked.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, apparently people that get this kind of heart attack like die 90% of the time. So he lived through it and had a turnaround. He changed his diet, changed his habits, and lost just a ton of weight. And he's barely recognizable anymore. Now he's vegan. So if you see photos of him now and can't recognize him, that's why.
Well, let's not talk about people that are vegan. Like I was with you and like, well, good for him right up until you said he's vegan. Then my thought process kind of went like, oh, well, I mean, vegan.
All right, that reminds me of a joke. How do you know when someone's vegan?
Oh, the same way you know if someone's a fighter pilot. They'll tell you.
They'll tell you. Well, these are the hazards of growing old. I mean, I bet right up until the minute he had that heart attack, if you'd asked him about his life and his decisions, he would have given some brash, clueless defense of his decisions in life, saying things like, you only live once and I do what I want. But, man, almost dying really changes your tune on things.
Well, yeah, if you're brought face to face with your mortality, it does tend to change people's outlook. And I really like how you softballed that transition into the age conversation for me. I like that very much. So this is something that my wife and I thought about and had a little discussion about, and I chuckled over it. And I figured I'd share it with you, Ben, because we have nothing else to talk about on this podcast, so why not?
This is life. We're talking about life.
So exactly, we were watching football a couple of weeks ago, and just noticing the ages of the players. And my wife started Googling some of the people that were playing. And like somebody says like, oh, he's one of the veterans of the team. He's been here forever. He's really setting the tone for the other guys. And my wife like looked him up like, Josh, that guy's 34, which is younger than both of us are.
Yeah.
And it just kind of started this. I had this idea where, everything in life is a bell curve. And I realize now, Ben, that I have gone over the top, the peak, the middle point of that bell curve when it comes to age. And I'm starting to slowly slide down the other side of it.
You're not in the NFL.
I'm not in the NFL, but I'm at an age now where I feel like there's more people that are younger than me than there are people that are older than me.
Okay, I get it. So you're kind of on the other half of that hump there.
Yes. And I don't know, like especially watching the football players. Like you look at them and they look like, I don't know. at some point when I was in high school watching football, like, oh, these are grown men and professionals. And then now when I watch football, I see these guys like, man, look at these freaking kids making all these terrible decisions.
Yeah,
And
I think that's a good measure of your like mental awareness of where you are in life. How disconnected your perception of yourself in relation to other people of different ages is.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just like you're talking about with the perception. That is interesting because now I'm thinking about at work where we have a myriad of different generations like represented. Right. Like my boss is probably 8 or 9 years older than I am. And then the other employees are probably 8 or 9 years younger than I am. So like we have kind of this 3-generation gap where I don't like my boss likes to associate the
Does
two
that
of
mean
us.
I'm the same age as your boss?
Probably. But my boss likes to associate us together, like as a generation thing. Like, oh well, you know, us older people, and I like in my mind, I'm always a little bit like, I mean, like I understand what you're going for, but I don't necessarily want to be associated with your generation. But at the same time, then the young people are like, oh yeah, you know, we were out until 2 the other night and just putting back beers. Then I got up, went to the gym the next day. I'm like, oh God, that all sounds awful.
Oh no. Well, have you ever had a younger adult, I know they don't do this kind of thing before, but do the equivalent of calling you sir? Like where they're very cognizant of the gap.
So, yes, that has happened to me, but it's never bothered me because I was in the Air Force and I've been called sir since I was 20. Right. So, I mean, it just But
in that social situation, it's not a sign of respect so much as an acknowledgement of the perception of the age differential.
I've never been sirred by anybody that I couldn't beat up, so I'm okay with
it. Unless they had to because you outranked them. Well, so what does that mean now that you recognize that you're sliding down the backside of the age curve?
That I need to get better sleep. I need to eat better, but I'm not gonna. I did spend extra money on an ergonomic office chair because I can't just sit on a stool for 8 hours a day anymore.
I see that you haven't given into collared shirts yet.
Well, I'm wearing a t-shirt right now, but what does that mean? Like
you always wear t-shirts.
Well, I wear t-shirts like when I'm talking to you.
What do you wear to the office?
This is a stupid Scrubs joke because like Dr. Cox was calling them like, "Oh, grow up, stop wearing ironic t-shirts and like get a life." Like that was one of the lines.
You're doing something that doesn't suit what age you are.
Right. So, but at work, when I go to work, I always wear slacks. I always wear a long sleeve button-up shirt with a tie. And I used to wear short sleeve button-up shirts with ties, but then one of my senior NCOs when I was a lieutenant called it a nerd jersey, and now I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah. And those kind of cultural norms are changing. There's people that are breaking them down. You know, I heard recently that some corporation, I want to say it was Amazon, I don't know what it was, that some new like corporate VP came in and noticed that they had like 14 pages of their new employee manual that was dedicated to their dress code. And they cut it out and replaced it with one sentence.
What's that one sentence?
It's something like wear a clothing that's appropriate for work.
You see, that's the problem, though. And the reason those 14 pages existed is because of bureaucracy. Because they started with, just like every business in the world starts, hey, just wear what's appropriate for work. But then everybody's perception of what is appropriate is different, and everybody is going to push those boundaries. And so somebody showed up with wearing something that was either completely inappropriate that they thought was appropriate, or something that was so offensive that one of the other employees complained. Now you have an HR issue that's affecting productivity and the bottom line. So now we need to define what is work appropriate just a little bit better. And then thus begins the slippery slope of 14 pages of dress code.
Maybe. I'm going to completely antagonize you here because you represented the old think so effectively. I don't think it has to be that way. I think that part of the cultural transformation of wiping out 14 pages of dress code and replacing it with one sentence is that the next time one of those issues come up, you handle it differently. You say, you know what? Maybe you're the problem for thinking that her clothing is disruptive. Maybe you're the problem instead of treating her like she's the problem.
The difference between our two outlooks, the fact that I understand where the bureaucracy came from and you disagree with it because of the things that you said, is inherently based in our fundamental understanding of humanity. I have zero expectations of human decency on the planet Earth. Everybody is out for themselves and they're going to get away with as much as they possibly can. And so you have to have structure in order to contain the barbaric nature that is humanity. Where you, Ben Rich, on the other hand, are like, you know what? Everybody, let's come together and let's grow and let's be respectful and let's understand people's differences. Like, that just doesn't happen in the real world.
Doesn't 14 pages sound excessive to you?
How long is the Air Force's dress code? And everybody wears the same thing every day.
Okay, do that thing where you stall for a second while I look it up.
So Ben is going to go to the internet and find the AFI. It's 23 something. I don't remember.
362903.
362903. I knew there was a 20 in there somewhere. You see, I used to know that number because when I was at the Air Force Academy, I spent a semester as the Standards and Evaluations NCO for my group, which means I was the one that was in charge of memorizing that regulation and enforcing it on all the people below me.
It's 158 pages long.
So you look me in the eye and tell me 14 pages is too many.
14 pages is too many. Just this week, they relaxed the standards for women's hair in the Air Force.
My wife commented on that, and she actually always had a problem with those standards. Not because she had a problem, but because she was telling me that the hair regulations for women were... I don't know the best way to phrase this, but they were very difficult to enforce and very difficult to maintain if you were a black woman. Oh no,
yeah, it was, but no, they already relaxed them for natural hairstyles for black women. The change this week was allowing them to wear braids and ponytails.
Good,
which was prohibited before.
How is a ponytail not professional?
It's just old. I think we should wipe it out and start over. I like this approach. I know you kind of rebutted it with the slippery slope thing of, well, those 14 pages existed for a reason, so they should be defended. Okay, if we need more than one sentence, okay, but let's wipe it out and find out what we missed instead of just defending the old stuff.
I get what you're saying, but at the same time, there like that 115 pages of uniform reg serves a purpose that's beyond just...
No, 158, Josh.
158 pages. It serves a purpose beyond just the dress and appearance of a person that may or may not have any standards.
But, like, can you work safely and be productive at an Amazon office building is way different than can you perform in combat and have good discipline in the military. Way different.
Well, this is the thing. This is one of the fundamental, the foundational bricks that you put into a new recruit's head. Is like, this is one of the things that sets us apart because we take the little things so seriously.
Wait, I want to take this opportunity and read a section from this reg to our audience. Audience, if you've never read from an Air Force military regulation, they always have a little bit of like upfront information like this.
Kool-Aid.
Pride in an airman's personal appearance and wearing of the uniform greatly enhances the esprit de corps essential to an effective military force. Therefore, it is most important for all airmen to maintain a high standard of dress and personal appearance. The 5 elements of this standard are neatness, cleanliness, safety, uniformity, and military image. And what they don't say is, and now it's going to take us 158 pages to define that.
What you're missing here, Ben, is that some major pinned on lieutenant colonel for writing that paragraph at the beginning of that. Oh, man. Like, that just sounds so good. That sounds so good. How could you ever disagree with it? What do you have? What's your problem with esprit de corps, Major Ben Rich?
Why do you hate nuclear surety?
It was written by a committee. Just that everybody.
You don't even realize you believe in the "why do you hate nuclear surety" standard of method of leadership.
No. I believe in "why do you hate nuclear surety" as a way of completely undermining somebody's position in an argument.
Right. Oh, very, very well done. Perfect timing. Okay, so you had one other follow-up question you wanted to ask me from what we talked about last time.
Yes, so, ladies and gentlemen, we need to do an update, like critical news about the super spreader event that was Ben Rich deciding to go home for New Year's. So, I don't want to ask what the death toll is, but has it spread farther from you?
How many people died as a result of my
like, if we go 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon,
behavior.
Yeah, honestly, like talking about 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon,
Okay.
everybody that dies of COVID after like last week, I'm blaming on you personally.
All right. I'm going to do like I do sometimes, and I'm going to really break down your question because I think it's important to do. All of the rules and suggestions coming out of places like the Center for Disease Control are designed to control all aspects of this kind of thing. Like, for instance, quarantining when you know you've had symptoms and notifying anyone you had contact with during a certain period allows you to do a very personal, direct kind of determination for something that may have a period where it's contagious and not detected, or no symptoms are being shown. And it allows you to catch those kinds of corner cases. But that still doesn't catch a lot of stuff. So then you also have the hand washing and the sanitation and the masks and all those kinds of things. And each one of those is a little circle of a Venn diagram that doesn't necessarily overlap with the others and gives you a little bit of additional protection for another corner case, another situation. And the situation in which I contracted COVID was I took an unnecessary risk by going to a public place that was following all of those rules. And I didn't take any unnecessary risks based on all those rules. Like, I wasn't walking around without my mask on or eating without washing my hands or, whatever. I followed all of those rules. So I got into that area where even following all those rules, there's still residual risk. But I never knew who exposed me to it. So I didn't know how long it had been since I contracted it. I didn't know what the compromise had been that led to my infection. None of that stuff. My family, on the other hand, hadn't gone anywhere. I found out I had it, and they immediately went into quarantine. So it was contained.
Excellent. I am very glad to hear that. I also want to point out that people who are innocent of crimes don't launch into giant, long, elaborate explanations of how they didn't do anything wrong. Just throwing that out there for thought.
Yeah. So no one died. No extra vulnerable people got it. There was a little hair raising moment with that. I'd given it to my son, and he'd been near my mother and my sister, who were both in very high risk categories, and luckily none of them got it because of me. So.
Well, Ben, I am very glad that nobody got sick because of you, and I'm still going to chastise you for being an idiot. And do you feel? I'm sure you feel still a little guilty about doing it.
Of course. In fact, one of my listeners said, there's something really interesting about your podcast. I'm like, what's that? They're like, you are really vulnerable sometimes. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, you say things that people wouldn't normally admit to in public. I'm like, what are you talking about one in particular? They're like, yeah, the stuff you said about you contracting COVID and giving it to other people. I'm like, yeah, just wear my heart on my sleeve sometimes, I guess.
That's excellent. You be the good person, I'll be the funny guy, and then that'll be how we get through this.
I hope our audience can relate to, making a mistake and feeling bad about it.
Oh, no, I've never made a mistake, and I don't feel bad about anything.
That's why I keep you around, just for that reality check.
I can wait. If you listen carefully, you can hear Nicole screaming from the house, right? As we're talking.
From the future.
from the future, yes.
All right, so I got some big news this week, Josh. I got my next military assignment.
Oh, and this was big news. Listeners, if you haven't been keeping up on Ben Rich's follow-on assignment, he went through, Sisyphusian, grabbed a boulder and shoved it up this mountain in a way that he normally doesn't do. Like, he called in favors, he tried to play the game. He doesn't do that. He usually lets he's such a reserved, competent person. He just lets his actions speak for themselves. But he wanted this last job so badly that he went out of his way to try to get it, and he did not. So now we are finding out just how crushed his spirits are.
All right. So do you remember, either you speculated or I told you speculation, do you remember where I said I thought I would probably end up going?
I thought you said you were going to go to the Pentagon. Or it was going to be, no, it was Mobility Command.
I'm already at Mobility Command. Good guess, though.
Not Mobility no, it was the nuclear. That's right. It was the nuclear experience. It's going to stand out like a sore thumb, and you were going to go back to, was it TAC? I don't remember what it's called. The nuclear place.
Yes.
Stratcom.
That's it. Yep. Global Strike Command, Barksdale Air Force Base, Louisiana. That's where I'm going.
Oh, Ben. Louisiana is great. the real estate there is wonderful. Like for the price of a tiny little townhouse in New York, you're going to get like 23 acres and a lake. You'll love it.
The BAH, the basic allowance for housing that I get that's set on the cost of the local economy is roughly $100 less than I get now. So I'm guessing it's a very similar standard of living to what I already have.
You haven't purchased a home in any of the places that you've gone, have you?
We bought a home in Colorado.
Oh, okay. Do you still own that, or did you sell it when you left?
I sold it when I left.
Okay, that's the smart thing to do. I tried once to keep the house when I left, and it was just a living nightmare.
Yeah.
But do you think, will this be a place that you'll settle down, or are you just know going in that you're going to serve out the rest of your career in this place and then you're going to go somewhere else?
That second one.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely no intent whatsoever of staying in Louisiana. It's just moving farther away from people that matter to us in every way. This will just be finish off my career.
Ben, people everywhere matter to you. Like everybody you've ever met, like you have their name on your quick dial Rolodex.
Well, I don't have anyone in Louisiana yet, but even once I do, that's not going to make me stay there. I'm not staying in Louisiana.
Oh, all right. Well, the predictions, long-term bets, ladies and gentlemen. Ben is going to fall in love with Louisiana and be sad that he's leaving, 5 years from now?
4.
4.
But 3. Wow. I'm 3.5 years away from retirement, Josh.
Lucky bastard.
Yeah. So I feel like I need to fill in a few things for people that are listening to this and just don't have any military context whatsoever. So all of it's, I don't know how much background to give. The military retirement plan used to be that you are not fully vested until you reach 20 years of service. And if you serve less than 20 years of service, you're basically you get out with a pat on the back, hopefully a medal, and some minor ducats and veterans, insurance.
That's what I got with 13 years of experience. I got a handshake and a bad plaque.
Now, the government realized that but then once you reach 20 years of service, then you retire on half of your current pay, basically.
Based on the last 3 years of your salary.
Yeah. I was deciding how many details like that to add, but thanks.
Math is important. I'm an accountant.
Okay, so which is a substantial amount to get half your base pay for the rest of your life. And then for every year you serve from 20 years of service to 30 years of service, you get an additional 2.5%. So that if you retire after 30 years of service, your high 3 divided by 0.75 is what you get for the rest of your life. It's pretty good.
Pretty good.
It's also very expensive to the U.S. government. And so in order to solve it, they recently instituted a new plan that's very similar to just a corporate 401k. And there was a overlap period where they allowed people that were in their middle years of service to choose to transition to the new plan or to remain on the old plan. And a few years ago, they reached a cutoff where every new person entering the service is now on the new plan and does not even have the option of the old plan.
Wow, I did not know this. If anybody transitioned from the old plan to the new plan, then they shorted themselves.
The only reason you would want to do that is if you intended to get out before 20 years of service. Then you would at least get out because basically what they added was that they have a government match to any contributions you make to your tax sheltered retirement account.
Right. Okay. So I mean, yes, that is still generous, but it is not nearly as generous as getting half your pay for the rest of your life.
Right. But it does take a whole big chunk of people, and I mean a big chunk of people, that have served in the military for less than 20 years, have given a significant amount of their life, and then just get a kick in the butt and get out with no, retirement plan, no savings, no anything really.
Yeah.
So now anyone that comes in the service for any amount of time, as long as they contribute the minimum amount, gets a pretty substantial government match into a very good tax sheltered account that then they can, roll over once they leave and carry with them until they're eligible to start drawing on it at retirement age. And it's a good plan for those people. So it balances it more so that anyone that gets out before 20 years of service is getting something, but it's not as generous after 20 years. So I'm kind of fortunate to be in since I'm making it to 20. But for you, it would have been better to transition and, get a government match on your contributions to your tax sheltered account.
Oh, Ben, if we could go back and list all of the mistakes that I've made in my life, that doesn't even make the top 10.
Yeah. Anyway, I told you all that because the other bit of context I want to give is that over the course of a 20-year military career, you can expect to relocate your home and house at least 5 times, if not more. Basically, because of the structure of the military manpower, particularly for officers, they expect you to move around to different functional jobs over the course of your career so that you continue to develop a breadth of experience. So they very deliberately do not allow you to stay in one place more than 3 to 4 years.
They say that, but then you serve in like functionally identical jobs a lot of the time.
Yeah, and they waste a lot of money. It's expensive to uproot someone and move them to a new place. Expensive in productivity, expensive in just the cost of shipping your goods and all the transitional costs and those types of things. But here's a fundamental paradigm, I believe, that's the source of this problem. The people that control the money are disconnected from the people that control the development of the force, and so there's no weighing of the financial cost of moving people around against the cultural reasons for moving people around.
Oh, this is one of the biggest problems with government agencies in general, is it really felt like working for the military that there was no sense of responsibility for the budget.
If the people who were defending the decision to move people every 3 years actually had to pay the money out of their budget to move them around, they might have a change of heart.
Oh, they'd find some new way of doing it.
Right. Like you said, they would just move you to a functionally identical job at a different base and call it developmental.
Which is what they're doing to you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm going from one Air Force Major Command 4-star headquarters staff to another.
Where you, if you've seen the movie Office Space, that's basically Ben's life. It's just forms and reports and PowerPoints. Like, well, I need to get the forms so I can fill out the PowerPoint, so I can brief the general so we can generate the forms to make the PowerPoints.
Yes, but it's about cool stuff because something blew up and someone died and we dropped some bombs. And then we do forms and PowerPoints.
That coolness only takes you so far. I was close enough to a major command to realize, like, yeah, we're talking about war, but boy, is it boring at this level.
Yeah. So in July, we're moving to Louisiana.
Have you started looking for houses, or are you just going to live on base again?
Well, I haven't lived on base since 2011, 2010, but I think we might actually.
Yeah, Ben, you look at me. Like, I'm doing the finger thing where I'm pointing at my eyes and I'm pointing at your eyes. Like, you looking at me?
Yes.
Wrap around porch. You're going to be in the south. You're going to need it.
I need trees with moss hanging off them in the front yard.
You need to learn how to make tea. If you don't like sweet tea, learn to love it. Because, I mean, sweet tea was one of the things I walked out of Virginia with. Just I love sweet tea for the rest of my life. I go to restaurant, well, not anymore, not right now, but I go to restaurants and be like, do you have sweet tea? They go, we have tea and you can put sweetener in it. And I go, that's not what I said. I'll take a Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, I'll have to work on my Southern street cred.
You're in Florida. You can work on that now.
Well, speaking of Dr. Pepper, I hear you've been having some issues with your online grocery orders.
And by here, you mean you read my notes ahead of time trying to transition. You do good keeping us on point here at the podcast. Now, so this is something I wanted to bring up because I fought this transition for so long, and I don't know why. So recently, in the last month, we've decided like the numbers for COVID in Arizona have started to skyrocket again. And we're one of the worst states in the union for mask adherence and public standards. And our state governor has basically completely washed his hands of it. So our numbers are bad and they're getting worse.
As far as like trying to force the public to behave a particular way?
Yes, he did have like a mask mandate and a business shutdown at the beginning, at the initial push back in March. But it's a Republican-held state still in the state, and he backed off of that hard. I'm sure
he was just getting flooded with, you'll take my guns from my cold dead hands kind of constituency.
my Nicole told me about a story in the news today where a local business owner had a sign that said, "You are not allowed in my store if you are wearing a mask." And a masked patron who was shopping at his store, the store
was
owner
asked to leave?
No, the store owner pulled a gun on him and told him to get out.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is the thing we have to remember in a country where we have freedom of speech. If you're going to say that a proprietor of a store can deny service to his customer for not wearing a mask, then shouldn't the opposite also be true?
Uh, in what sense? Like
In
a
the
person,
sense
if
that
they're not
we're
wearing a mask, you can kick him out. Yeah.
yeah.
No, because if you're wearing a mask in my store and I say no masks, you're impinging on my freedom. But if I go into your store where you're saying I have to wear a mask, you're impinging on my freedom again somehow. There's no winning this argument. It's all circular logic based on
Yeah.
what you believe. It's honestly, this whole mask thing is way too politicized. I might just wear a mask when I go out for the rest of my life because it would probably keep me healthier anyway.
You'd fit right in Southeast Asia. So what part of this were you doing wrong?
Well, I wasn't doing anything wrong.
You're just giving the context of why your discomfort level has gone up.
Right. Our discomfort level went up. The only time that I really interact with the world, I'm the only one that leaves the house for either for work or to go grocery shopping. And those were the two reasons that I would ever leave our house. And
for going on a year now?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess going on a year now. Yeah, a year in March.
Wow.
But with the numbers getting as bad as they are, and we have this grocery delivery thing where you just pull up your car, you text them, hey, I'm here, and they bring your groceries to your car. We never really trusted it for a lot of reasons. One, it's other people picking your groceries, and if you're getting produce, who knows what you're going to get. Number two is, you know how it is at the grocery store. You have your list, but there's always going to be the one or two things that you walk past. You're like, oh, I forgot to put this on the list, but now that I see it, I know that I need it.
This is an interesting category of human risk evaluation where there are the risks that people have a tendency to overweigh risks that they feel that they can control.
Yeah, and going to the grocery store, I felt like I was in control of myself. Right. I'd wear the mask, I'd sanitize my cart, but at the same time...
Even though I'm sure the retailers were assuring you that their delivery services were very sanitary.
Well, and I'm sure they are. They're probably more sanitary than me walking through that store because, Again, we don't have great mask adherence. And like it made me a little emotionally upset seeing the people that were not just disobeying the rules, but flaunting their disobedience.
I think you're understating the case, but go on.
Anyway, so we decided, let's give it a shot. We'll see how it goes. We ordered our groceries online. I pulled up to the spot. I texted, hey, I'm here. I sat listening to my audiobook for 10 minutes, and then they came out, are you this person? I am this person. And they put all the groceries in my car. I didn't have to touch them. And then they're like, you're good. Bye. Thank you. And then I drove home, and I had all my groceries in a quarter of the time that I usually take to grocery shop.
Wow.
Yeah. I was a big fan. And interesting fact, when I grocery shop, this is how OCD I am when it comes to grocery shopping, is I plan my route through the grocery store that I get all of the heavy items into my cart first. And then when I'm unloading my cart, I make sure I unload all the heavy items first. So that way when they bag them, they're the ones that go at the bottom of my shopping cart and the light stuff goes on top.
How much is the fee of this?
I actually have no idea.
Sorry, light stuff on top.
Well, I have no idea how much I'm paying extra for this.
Sorry, my brain went on a tangent and I'm just putting a bookmark in, but go ahead. Light stuff on top.
But the problem is I put it on a conveyor belt and it goes down to some, minimum wage 16-year-old kid where this is his first job. And half the time I want to shove him out of the way. Like, let me show you how a man bags groceries and like put it together the way that it's supposed to be put together. Like I'm dishing it up to you the easiest possible. Heavy stuff on the bottom, light stuff on top. And somehow they still screw up or they overpack a bag and the handles will rip off and like so many problems with bagging. But when it is the person who is actually pulling the stuff off the shelves has to bag the groceries for himself to put into my car, all of a sudden, the bagging is excellent. We have sturdy double bags for one or two items. Things that are light and compressible are in a bag all by themselves. Like, it is insane.
Do you realize what you just did?
What's that?
You got great service, and instead of praising it as good service, you're praising it as a referendum on how bad of service you were getting before.
That's why I'm a cynical person, is I'm looking at there's every cloud has a silver lining, but I'm still staring at the rain.
But I think you're comparing like one or two bad experiences and treating that as if it's the whole time. Like, they don't bag your grocery terribly every time. They're like putting canned beans on top of a loaf of bread and single bagging 50 jars.
There's a lot of variables when it comes to getting a good bagger. But no bagger that I've ever had was up to my standards of bagging groceries. Some to the point where I prefer when the bagger is on break or something, and I've got to rush down there and bag it myself because I'm faster, more efficient, and I bag it better.
Wow, that's a big difference between us. Because I remember one time there was no bagger, and I realized I had to do it myself, and I sucked so bad. I made so many mistakes. I didn't know you could make as many mistakes as I made.
Well, you don't think about all the stupid things that I think about, Ben. Anyway,
all right. Well,
so
you make a good bagger.
I took less time. The bagging was wonderful. And not the first time, but the second and third time now, we are realizing that we are stealing groceries from the grocery store.
What?
Yeah. So twice this has happened where I hauled the groceries inside the house and we're unpacking them. We're putting them away and realize, hey, this wasn't on the list. And it was like the first time it was a bag of frozen meatballs. I'm like, yeah, but we usually get those. Yes, we usually get this brand, but it was not on our list. And we checked and it wasn't on the receipt either.
So you hadn't paid for it, but you got it.
We hadn't paid for it, but we got it. And
okay. So it's just some kind of technological flaw.
Wait, one shot deal, who knows? Maybe somebody next to us had gotten it and it ended up on our thing. Who knows? But then this time, Ben, we had put in the order and it was going to be fulfilled in an hour. Like we put it in the day before, and an hour before I was set to go pick it up, I get a text message. Hey, there are some items we don't have. Click this button and go through the things that we don't have and see if you'll accept some substitutions. I was like, oh, okay. One of the substitutions that was offered to me was they did not have canned Dr. Pepper because there's an aluminum shortage at the canning plants. It's a whole thing. But they did have...
We'll add that to our list of COVID shortages.
They did have canned Dr. Pepper cream soda. Not Dr. Pepper, but Dr. Pepper cream soda. Now, I like the cream soda, but my wife drinks regular Dr. Pepper. So I said on the app, I said, no, we do not accept the substitution. Just take it off our list entirely.
And that failed. Yeah.
Not only did I get Dr. Pepper cream soda, I got one more case than we had originally ordered. We had ordered 2 cases of Dr. Pepper. They gave me 3 cases of Dr. Pepper. But again,
I'm assuming the financial side of this was fine and they didn't charge you for either.
They didn't charge us for any Dr. Pepper. We checked the receipt. It wasn't even on there.
Okay, so you've gotten a free bag of meatballs and 2 cases of Dr. Pepper.
3 cases of Dr. Pepper.
3 cases of Dr. Pepper. Okay, so you started this off by using the word stealing. I know you're just being facetious. Do you feel like it's your obligation to try to return those to the store?
No, absolutely not. Not in any way, shape, or form. I
don't either. Even though we're probably coming from different moral points of view here, I don't either.
I see this as a bank error in my favor.
I see it as a cost of the transition to the company.
Okay. Like the company knows that there's going to be some mistakes and they're just going to eat it.
Right. They're still working out the bugs in the technology. Now, I don't know how long it'll take to fix it if they don't have a way to detect that this kind of thing is happening, but there has to be some bean counter out there that's like, why are we getting shrinkage? Like, what's happening?
Oh, Ben, like a retail store like this, like their whole life is inventory. Like they have an inventory control system.
So why are we shy a bag of meatballs and 3 cases of Dr. Pepper?
They're absolutely easily going to start assigning this to, these are just losses due to the shopping method. Maybe,
but it also shows that there's no step in the process for validating what you paid for against what they're giving you.
Yet, and that might be, maybe it has to go through a second check.
That's the point I'm making.
I see what you mean.
I had a similar problem this week at a fast food restaurant that I guess I just won't name just for no reason, where instead of going through the drive-thru, I wanted to try their online app so I could have less interaction with people.
Okay.
Just like hit the I'm here in my parking spot button and have someone come out and hand me my food through the window without me having to talk to them through a drive-thru speaker.
Okay.
So I did it back in December, and I sat there, and I sat there, and I sat there, and I finally went inside, and they're like, what order?
Did you order from the wrong restaurant?
So let me tell you something, a cultural transformation we haven't made yet that's similar to what you're talking about. When you show someone a receipt on your screen, they do not think of that as a valid receipt as if it were on a piece of receipt paper.
So you showed some minimum wage 14-year-old that you had paid for something and he didn't believe you.
Yes, it was proof that my credit card had been charged, and it showed the date, it showed the time, it showed the location, it showed the restaurant, all of that stuff, and he wasn't going to believe me. I had to escalate to the manager, and then they made me my food, and they did it wrong, but I didn't want to fight after that, and I left.
Oh, Ben. If I had to go through a manager to get my food and they made it wrong, I'd have gone falling down on that restaurant.
Yeah, okay.
Michael Douglas with an Uzi shooting the place up.
So a month later, I decided to give it another shot, just because. Yeah, and that's about how frequently I go back to the same restaurant. But I decided to give it one more shot. So I do it, same thing happens. I'm sitting there 15 minutes. It gives me all the signs in the app of having validated my order and that the cooks inside were cooking it and it would be brought out to me shortly, and nothing happened. So I went inside, did the same thing, showed on my phone, but this time the minimum wage employee wasn't even willing to read it. He's like, if you didn't pay, you don't get any food. In his brain, the only way he gets an order pop up on his screen to be made is if someone's paid. And the fact that it didn't pop up on his screen means I didn't pay. And he thinks of me as trying to get something for nothing. And so he went full like angry guy Stonewall, like I used to feel sometimes as a minimum wage employee that felt like I was getting abused by customers that were just pushing me around to get something for nothing.
Okay.
So I insisted on knowing more information about what was happening, because I wanted to figure out why this had happened to me. I thought, the first time I thought maybe it's just whatever, the universe was wrong. But this time it was the exact same thing. So I found out that they had the beginning of an order pop up on their screen, but on their screen it showed as not paid. And on mine it showed as paid. And the difference was 59 cents, which was the tax on my order. For some reason, the localization part of the app on my phone was determining that I didn't owe tax. But in the process of transitioning my order from the app to their computer system, it was calculating that I did owe tax and my order was showing as not paid.
So you were short 59 cents.
Yes. So I said, okay, here's 59 cents. And said, sorry, sir, we can't take that.
What do you mean you can't take that?
They can't take that because the order only came in through the online system and they don't have any way to interact with it financially.
This is like the cash register doesn't open just because I hit the button. Like I have to do stuff.
Right. I have to have made a transaction. Exactly. So I finally insisted enough that they made my food. But it was the danger zone, Josh. It was they're back there spitting in my burger zone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I get that. So I can't help but speculate. Like this doesn't sound like a McDonald's. McDonald's would have had these problems ironed out.
You want to know what restaurant it was?
This is. I feel like, all right. What is the genre of food? Tell me the genre of food that you ate, and I'll be able to...
American style.
So this was definitely Burger King.
Nope.
Wendy's then.
Yeah, it was Wendy's.
I got it. Second try.
Okay, so I went back. I told the manager, I'm like, look, this has happened to me twice now. It can't just be me. Like, there must be some kind of glitch with your app. I'm definitely not using it anymore. But whoever's making the app probably wants to know this. How do I tell them?
Oh, Ben. Oh, and you went on the crusade. Like, that's it.
I did.
I found a problem,
crusade.
and I'm gonna make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Was your cape fluttering in the breeze behind you as you stood there triumphantly?
I don't know who I imagine in my head is this, random victim out there. Maybe I'm the only victim in the universe, but I'd like to think I made the world better for one person at least.
But you're also
There's some application developer out there that has a queue that got a new ticket in it that they're able to investigate and have a bullet for their next, bill to the contract.
You're assuming that every person in this process is like you. The manager probably has no clue how to interact with that app whatsoever.
Okay, I bet that there's one particular aspect of my order that made the problem. I'm realizing how boring this might be to listen to as a listener of the podcast.
But your phone is registered in Illinois, and you're currently in Florida.
Exactly. And my billing address for my credit card is in Illinois. So when it goes through the billing process, it's like, oh, in Illinois we don't charge tax, and so then it does. But then the order comes in here as if it was from a person in Florida. So anyone who's local wouldn't have this problem. Only someone visiting from out of state who's also using the app to order in the parking spot instead of going through the drive-through. So maybe it's never happened. I don't know.
So two things. One, you would have to get a hold of somebody at the app developer that cared enough to even intake this problem into their system for troubleshooting, first of all. Secondly, they would immediately do the math. How many people are suffering from this problem and how much would it cost us to fix it? And if those numbers don't line up, they're not going to do anything.
It feels to me like the kind of problem they certainly had to have addressed. The fact that I got charged transactionally, it appeared to me as a customer that I paid for my order, and then when I went inside, they would not give me my order, and there was a discrepancy about paying taxes. Like that to me, if I'm a middle manager or some type of application developer, that's so many red flags. You can't not fix that.
Yeah, you absolutely can not fix that because nobody on the planet thinks like you do, Ben Rich.
All right. Well, enough of that. It's time for Bad at English.
It's about time for Bad at English.
So there's a category of words that are things that they call something completely different than we call it in the U.S. to the point where they don't even recognize the word for what we call it, and we don't recognize the word for what they call it. So if you've already looked at the notes, I'm sorry, but I'm going to tell you now. Do you know what the phrase "noughts and crosses" means?
I have not looked at the notes because I don't like to spoil myself for our lovely conversations, and I do not know what the phrase "noughts and crosses" means.
So a naught means a 0, and a cross in this case means an X. It's the British word for tic-tac-toe.
Oh, okay.
And you know what? It's way better than ours. Like, what the heck is tic-tac-toe? Even when I looked it up, I couldn't find a good explanation of why we call it that. Noughts and crosses means zeros and X's.
Oh. So this is what they call tic-tac-toe. Noughts and crosses.
Yeah. Noughts and crosses.
It is a better name for tic-tac-toe.
It is.
However, I'm going to counter-argue with the fact that tic-tac-toe makes the game sound as juvenile as it deserves to sound.
It is a solved game.
Yes. Why did you stop? Like, this was explained on Wargames, another classic movie from the 80s. Why did you stop playing tic-tac-toe when you were 7? Because it's stupid. You can never win. Exactly. There's no point.
Yeah, as I was researching this, I found a lot of cool stuff. Like, for instance, one of the very first computers back in the 1950s, solved the game where you could just create a program on punch cards that then you just give the computer input of your location on a 3x3 grid, and it could beat you every time or tie the game. But I also found out that there was some students at Harvard that made a computer out of Tinker Toys that can beat you at tic-tac-toe.
Well,
or noughts and crosses.
You love hearing about these computers made of things that are not what we traditionally can think of as computers. But a computer is just something that takes input, transforms it into an output.
Okay, Mr. Computer Science Degree, it's still fun that they made a computer out of Tinker Toys that could beat you at tic-tac-toe.
Well,
noughts and crosses.
Well, technically, Ben, a computer can be anything.
And so two other things I found that this game is called. In Northern Ireland, apparently they didn't want to call it Noughts and Crosses or Tic-Tac-Toe, and they call it Exiosies, which is also cool.
That's much better, yes.
Yeah, and in Canada they call it X's and O's.
Yeah, oh, good job. All right, Canada. Way to be just, that sounds like Canadians. Just, yeah, okay, X's and O's, yeah. That's what it is.
Right, want to play a game of X's and O's, eh? Let's do it.
I've been watching a lot of Canadian TV. Don't get me started on my accent.
Have you also been watching The Mandalorian on TV?
I have. Yes, we have watched a lot of The Mandalorian on TV.
Okay, let's give the mother of all spoiler warnings. Audience, if you have not yet watched all the way through the end of Season 2 of The Mandalorian, now's your chance to bail out before Josh and I spoil the heck out of it.
And you know what? I say this facetiously almost every episode, but this time, dang it, I really mean it. There are going to be spoilers for Star Wars in this episode of the podcast.
Yeah, and this dates back to a discussion I think we had in like episode 20 or something like that, where we talk about, when is the courteous time frame in which you reasonably should expect to be overly cautious about spoilers, and we're definitely within that time frame. I mean, the last episode of season 2 came out like a month ago.
Yes, we are definitely within the statute of limitations for possibly spoiling The Mandalorian for people.
Yeah. Okay. So, I know that you don't like when I go all meta and background and stuff like that, but I figured that's going to be my contribution to this discussion.
Hang on, stop. I feel like I have to beat this into your skull every time we review anything. The first thing you do, thumbs up, thumbs down, what'd you think?
But that's why I want to give the background first, because whether or not you give thumbs up or thumbs down is based on your expectation of whether or not it was going to be good, or how good it was going to be, or what it was going to be to you.
No, false, wrong, incorrect. The way that you present information in a structured format is you tell people what you're going to tell them, Then you tell him. Then you tell him what you told him. So give us the meta background, and then I'll give us the story background.
Okay, so I think we've established well on this podcast that expectations were not really high for how well this was going to perform. We just come off the second trilogy. It was a bit of a mess. You and I have kind of touched on it before on this podcast, but what I realized while I was researching this the last couple of weeks is why it was a bit of a mess. There was a little bit of a magic formula that George Lucas had when he made the first Star Wars trilogy that I don't think he even knew what went into it. It was like that proverbial thing where they made some type of magic potion and some mouse walked by and bumped over a bottle and tipped in the secret ingredient that the creator of the recipe didn't know was in their recipe.
I like to think a lot of this had to do with the fact that George Lucas did have a strong image of what he wanted to do, but he was also constrained by real world limitations at the time. And so it kind of, he had to
brought out the creativity.
Exactly.
And innovation.
He had to innovate within his boundaries. And then also he had something to prove. He was kind of a no-name at the time. And so he didn't rest on his laurels.
Hungry, ambitious, hardworking, constrained, and all that just was the perfect storm for creating a really unique and interesting universe.
And such a wonderful thing, yes.
And taking things that we already know and trust, like the hero's round, and doing it in such a way that it was familiar and fresh at the same time.
Yes, and just all the little touches, like the characters just are tremendous throughout the movie. The plot makes sense. There are all these precious little moments. Like I talked about this before, but one of my favorite moments is when Luke sees the Millennium Falcon for the first time. And the music,
what a piece of junk.
Yeah, but the setup, like the music swells and it's this big, like the audience, like, oh, wow, a spaceship, and he's like, oh, this thing's a piece of garbage. Like the subversion of expectations is just perfect.
So you said something a second ago I want to take issue with. You said that Lucas had this great grand plan. He has insisted on that later in his life, but I think he's much more similar to J.K. Rowling in that he didn't have a great grand plan. He wants you to think that he did, but he didn't.
That would make sense why Leia and Luke make out at the beginning of the second movie.
Right, exactly. I don't think he even knew when he made the first movie. In fact, there's evidence in the first movie that he did not intend for Darth Vader to be Luke's father, and he definitely didn't know Luke and Leia were secret twins.
That's one of those things that I can see him in a basement with his head writers, like drinking beers late one night. Like, what would be really awesome?
But didn't you have to make out? We'll just pretend that didn't happen.
Yeah, but they didn't get married or nothing. It's fine.
They should have. There should have been a deleted scene of them having an awkward conversation after they found out that they're siblings. Instead of it should have been more awkward.
Afterward.
Like the scene in Emperor's New Groove when the llama wakes up and finds out that he just gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation.
Yeah, just the 5 seconds. Yeah, but that's you're getting in the way of yourself again. That's the kind of stuff that would happen in the extended director's cut that was released in the late 90s.
So here's a quote from George Lucas. I had a lot of vague concepts, but I didn't really know where to go with it. It's very hard stumbling across the desert, picking up rocks, not knowing what I'm looking for. I kept working on the script for Star Wars. I'm still not very happy with it. I never have been.
Well, and that's Tony Stark said this in a Marvel comic book. Art is never finished, only abandoned.
Well, so there's a fascinating concept I read about in a book by Malcolm Gladwell where he talks about the different two dichotomies, a dichotomy of two different types of artists. One he calls the young prodigy, and the other he calls the late bloomer. And they have a very different way of creating a masterpiece. The young prodigy will just knock something out when they're young, and it's fantastic. And the late bloomer, or the old master, will constantly be refining the same thing over and over, trying to figure out what it is he wants to create and never actually getting there. And he gave the example of Pablo Picasso and Paul Cézanne. Pablo Picasso, if you look at the value of his works and what they've sold for at auction, his works from in his 20s sell for like 4 times what his works later in his life did. Paul Cézanne, on the other hand, is the opposite. His works that he did in his 50s sell for 10 times what his works he did early in his life were.
So just iterative process versus getting lucky or having the natural born talent.
Yeah, something like that. And George Lucas, weirdly enough, shows the signs of both. He had the vocabulary in that quote I just read of the late bloomer. That I didn't quite know what I was looking for. I was searching for it. I kept iterating it. I never really felt like I got there. And you could see that later on once he had some wealth and some power and he started re-releasing director's cuts of his movies where he added additional special effects, changed the plots. I mean, big kind of changes where it just felt like he never felt like it was finished.
Yeah.
But then while he was young and had all these restrictions, he just pumped out this masterpiece that he failed to recognize for what it was.
Well, and that makes sense. Like with the world claiming him as this amazing artist and creator, but all he can see is the flaws in the thing that he's trying to make. He knows what he wants in his mind, and he knows what he made is not quite there.
So I don't fully know all of the history and politics surrounding why it went from 1983 till the year 2000 or whatever it was when Phantom Menace came out for another Star Wars movie to come out. But once it came out and it was just the perfect storm of pop culture and public sentiment and stuff, and it just turned into this massive money machine, then they started pumping them out really fast. And every time they were trying to capture lightning in a bottle, George Lucas was out of control because he just had not enough restrictions and his creativity was out of control, and the prequels weren't that great. And then when he sold off the property to Disney and they started hiring new creative teams who were, again, trying to capture that lightning in a bottle, it just wasn't quite the magic that they had in their original trilogy. And I think it's because of these things. It's the lack of restrictions.
You know what? I can feel where you're going with this. Like, one of the things that makes The Mandalorian, I think, in my opinion, so amazing is because it wasn't written by a committee. It wasn't written by an artist trying to refine what he has. It was written by someone who genuinely loves the material.
Yes. Yep, that's it. That's where I was going with this. That was what was missing in the second, in the prequel trilogy and in the second trilogy. It was that just love and affection. There was also other X factors. Like Star Wars didn't just feel real in the moment. It felt like it existed before the film started and would go on after it was over. And there was weird things that you didn't even realize were happening. Like, for instance, they were so constrained in their production of things that all of their high-tech stuff were like household items. Like they take a hairdryer and rip the handle off of it and paint it, and then it was the handle of a lightsaber or something like that. And while it looked high-tech, it also looked kind of familiar. Like the things you saw around looked like they were from a galaxy far, far away, but it also looked like it was from your grandma's bathroom.
Let's not underestimate the fact that it came out kind of side by side in a time when Star Trek was becoming a thing, where Star Trek was what people thought of as the future with the high-tech spaceships, everything slick, everybody was wearing the onesie. And then Star Wars was this absolute juxtaposition of, no, it's just normal life. There's still old crappy stuff, but it's just higher tech.
Oh, yeah. And what people had to compare it with were things like Star Trek or Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. And it just became the norm in people's minds for what space travel is. Everything's pristine, everything's clean, everything looks brand new. And the idea that your ship would be dusty or you would punch it to make it work again, it was just so foreign. Or that it would break down for no reason.
Or that people in this high-tech, what would be a utopian future, would be barely scraping a living on the outer rim, being moisture farmers.
Yeah, all that stuff. So it was magical. And so all of that combined to the fact that then when they released a couple of those in-betweenquels like Solo and Rogue One and stuff like that, and Solo, even though it made almost $400 million, was considered a failure in that it only made back 25% more than its production budget.
I maintain to this day, if they tried to make that movie, make exactly the same movie, but call the main character a different name, it'd have been a huge success. Everyone would been super happy with it.
Just people had too high of expectations for what that part of Han Solo's life should be like, and there was no way to live up to him.
Han Solo is on such a high pedestal in the fans' minds that you're never going to get there. So just make it some random movie based in a Star Wars universe, and people would have ate it up.
So that's exactly what they did with The Mandalorian.
Yes.
Now, I did a little bit of math, and if you total up the runtime of all of the films, the 9 trilogies as well as the additional movies, it's approximately just shy of 25 hours of runtime if you watch them all end to end.
Okay.
The Mandalorian is coming on towards 6 hours of runtime. So it's approximately, in runtime, 25% of all of the movies.
Wow. Wow, that's intense, huh? We know almost as much from just The Mandalorian as we do from the original trilogy. More from it, actually.
Yeah, if there was the same density of giving you new things, but they take it, that's one of the magical things about The Mandalorian is there's not this frenetic pacing. I mean, did you come out of the third movie of the new trilogy and I don't know if you felt like me, but I felt like I had to catch my breath. There was just so much happening.
Well, and that was the problem. They were breaking Sanderson's law. Build on what you have before you introduce something new.
Yes. And you have so much in this universe. As much as we, poo-poo those movies, they are canon. But where The Mandalorian falls in the timeline is shortly, well, maybe not so shortly, but after...
It's like 5 years after the end, after they blew up the second Death Star.
After the Return of the Jedi.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Before the new trilogy, but after the original trilogy.
So, I tell you all that so I can say these two things. One, our hearts and minds were still open to the possibility of a good new property based on the Star Wars universe.
We were thirsting. We were thirsting for it. We begging for good Star Wars content.
But two, our expectations were kind of low because what had been happening recently. Oh. Like I was starting to doubt if you could do it anymore, if they could capture that lightning in a bottle again. I read one article that said it's hard to put your finger on what makes it work. The Star Wars universe is a little like Narnia. Even those who've been there before can never be sure of getting in again.
So you're starting to kind of imply your feelings toward it. You want to put a bow on all this? How do you feel about it, Ben?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Excellent. All right, now before we transition out of the meta conversation, I have to put my meta piece onto this.
Okay.
This is something that I proposed to you via text message a long time ago. And if I have spoken on the podcast, please shut me down now. But I think that this is an example of what we can see from high budget visual entertainment in the future. My hypothesis, if I was going to write a video essay, is that Game of Thrones on HBO was an experiment in, can we make a lot of money with a very high budget, long-running TV show, as opposed to a series of movies?
Yeah.
They realized that yes, they could. Not only did the Game of Thrones make a ton of money, but it also maintained its presence in the public awareness and zeitgeist much, much longer than if it had been broken down into 3 or 4 movies. I'm throwing that out there. And so I think a lot more high-budget studios are going to look to this model as a viable option for making epic content like this. And from a producer's standpoint, making an episodic TV show, even with the high budget that it is superior in that you can focus group this to death. The feedback loop on an episodic TV show is so much shorter.
You're not talking about writing it by committee. You're talking about having time to just fix things that didn't work.
Exactly. Like you have this budget to shoot an episode, and if it focus groups badly, or if you get feedback from the community, you can incorporate that in your writing or where the story goes in the future.
If you have a bad episode, you can shrug it off and just do better next time.
Right, but if you have a bad movie, it's tough to shrug off a bad movie.
Yeah. Well, they did it between episodes 8 and 9, but yeah.
That's just because Disney has all the money. Like, they can absorb blows like that.
They weren't successful, but they definitely shrugged it off.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that Game of Thrones was the beta test. And shows like The Mandalorian, shows like WandaVision, which I'm begging to talk about in the future. This is going to be more of the norm.
All right, we'll put that one on the docket. But comparing it to Game of Thrones, that doesn't bode well for the end game of Mandalorian. Like, it didn't end well once...
Game of Thrones didn't end well because the TV show got ahead of the books, and the writers were TV writers. They were not story writers.
Instead of George Martin.
Exactly. They weren't invested in the story. They were invested in the ratings, and they didn't have...
And all they knew how to write was TV shows.
And they didn't have the love like Jon Favreau clearly has for the content of this.
Yeah, there's something unique about this Star Wars universe. It's like the fans all feel a sense of ownership for it, and that is a heavy burden to bear as a content creator. Because it's like you can't just be a good movie maker. You also have to be the king of the fans.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm not one of those fans that's gonna like if Jon Favreau can't answer or can't draw the hyperspace engine diagram of the Millennium Falcon from memory on a napkin. I'm gonna
Right.
poo-poo him as the
Yeah,
the guy.
and of course nobody can please those kinds of fans. But you know, even George Lucas proved he wasn't up to it. You know, he had this story he thought he wanted to tell, but it just turned into trade embargoes and Senate filibusters and stilted dialogue and ham-fisted romances and what a bunch of nonsense.
That was the romance was the worst. Like, listen, I'm an accountant. Like, I was a little in like, oh, I can see a war starting over trade embargoes. This is a very highbrow plot, but the romance drove me nuts. Like, you can't wear. All right, ladies, if you're listening from a guy's perspective, if you're wearing a leather bustier, you don't then get to say I'm not that into you. That's not how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of very talented people have tried. J.J. Abrams has had 2 cracks at it, and he's made some good movies. Rian Johnson, who may still direct some of the future Star Wars movies, gave it a good shot. Gareth Edwards with Rogue One, and even Ron Howard, you know, gave it a shot with Solo, but nobody could do it. You know, to quote Obadiah Stane, George Lucas made Star Wars in a cave with a box of scraps.
That's great. Well, and again, I think a lot of that failure is because we have such high expectations for the movies, and especially with like specific IP and the old characters, blah, blah, blah. Jon Favreau got a blank slate. He loves Star Wars. Make a Star Wars show. Like, there's no backstory. There's no direction we need you to go. Just make something good. And he took it, and I think he knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, and I think you made an important point a few minutes ago that you're like, if they'd made the movie Solo set in the Star Wars universe as a heist film, but it wasn't about Han Solo, it would have been fine. And that's the important thing, and it's what they haven't realized, that all these properties they keep trying to make where they're focused on the characters, like people keep coming back to the Star Wars universe because they care about the Skywalker family. What they don't realize is that there are stars in the Star Wars universe, but the real star is the universe.
Yes, that's what we want. I like the movies matter much less than just, I just want to live in Star Wars. I want to wrap myself in Star Wars like a warm, fuzzy blanket and just be.
I don't need to spend time with whatever, you know, Luke's latest ancestor. Just let's go to Tatooine and hang out in a bar.
Which brings us excellent into our plot, a quick story summary of what the Mandalorian is.
I think it starts out in a bar on Tatooine.
It's not Tatooine. It does start in a bar, which is great. And it's what we meet our protagonist.
Don't they go to the same tavern, though? Is it? They don't beat you over the head with it, but it's the same tavern from Star Wars Episode 4 that Han Solo was in with Luke.
There is droids. One episode where he does go. But we've talked about this before. One of the nice things about that is they didn't like call it out like, hey, everybody, look, I'm in Han Solo's booth. Like, it just was. Like, this is just a place that people go. Just like, if you know what it is, oh, super.
But if you notice it, it gave you a warm fuzzy, and if you didn't, it didn't matter.
Exactly. That's how you do Easter eggs correctly. Do we need to do a plot synopsis? Has anybody not watched The Mandalorian at this point? So I will give this point.
Give the 30-second version.
The 30-second version is there's a Mandalorian who's a bounty hunter. A Mandalorian it's not only a people, but it is a lifestyle and a religion. And their religion is that they are basically warrior monks at some point. Like, they're just all about kicking butt and taking names. That's their whole persona.
But they lost their funding source, so now they're warrior monk bounty hunters.
Well, they were such hardcore, and I want to say bad butts. Like, I want to say the A word, but I can't because we're keeping it PG. They were so hardcore that the Empire recognized them as a viable threat and basically had to glass their whole planet. So these people were scattered to the winds, and there's pockets of them around. But we meet our protagonist is a Mandalorian. He's got the armor, he's got the skills, he's got the training knowledge, and he just like he walks around like he's pretty short, but he
doesn't have the armor though. He starts out like a character in an online role-playing game that wants to level up his chest and shoulders.
It is still Mandalorian armor. It is just not the Beskar armor. It's not like made of.
I like that he levels up his armor though.
Killing me, Smalls. Anyway, he gets a job to go track down and retrieve a thing that he presumes is a bounty. He doesn't care what it is. He's just trying to do his job to earn his money to pay his cult. When he gets to the thing, he finds that it's everybody calls Baby Yoda. It is the same creature, that the same species of alien that Yoda was, but it is 50 years old.
That's a great example of the pacing. They're not in a hurry. This thing has a name, but they don't even tell you it in the entire first season.
Yeah,
and it shows up in episode 2.
They just call it the child. Like, even in the writing or the titles of the episodes and thing, it's just called the child for the entire first season.
Yeah.
And it can't talk. It's just like a baby. We don't know why these people want it, but he gets the child, he delivers it to the person, and then he's breaking all these taboos.
This was just a bounty. It was just a job.
It was just a job, but you can see. All right, so I'm gonna.
Then he gets invested.
Get through the plot. Get through the plot synopsis. He hands it over, but then he starts asking all these questions that are way out of character. What are you going to do with it? Why did you want it?
Right.
It's like,
not the kind of thing a bounty hunter does.
And then he decides, like, at the last minute, to like, no, this was wrong. And he goes and he raids the building and he rescues the child. And then the rest of the entire first and most of the second season, he's basically on the run from people that want this child that have way more resources than he does.
Yeah. But what's your understanding of his motivation? What made him change his mind?
So they talk about in the show where he was a foundling. He wasn't originally a Mandalorian, but he was found by Mandalorians and brought into their cult. And like,
he was an orphan that was adopted by the Mandalorians
and was raised as a Mandalorian. And
so you think he identified with the child as similar to himself?
Well, not just that, but then he spent the one episode where he was hauling the kid around. Like, the kid was just cargo while he was trying to get his ship fixed, and he had to fight the rhino thing. And the kid saved him. Like, the kid can't talk. It's not necessarily an infant, but he can't speak, and he's very young. But the kid saved him using his, unbeknownst to him, force powers. And like, he just started to identify and felt this ownership and this responsibility for the kid's well-being. Yeah. And he turned it over to undeniably shady characters.
Can I just take a moment and call a timeout and say how grateful I am that however we dodged the narrative bullet of turning this into like an episode of Mr. Mom, like that he wasn't changing diapers and being kept up in the middle of the night and dealing with crying and that kind of thing.
So this is one of the things that I wanted to gush over. And one of the reasons that I think Jon Favreau is killing it is, like, the number one rule of storytelling in a visual media is show, don't tell. I don't want a text crawl. I don't want.
You don't have time for that if you have to tell a 3-act story in 2 hours and 26 minutes. But if you have 5 hours to tell the story, you have time to show, don't tell.
There is this wonderful scene, and it is in season 1, episode 3. It's called The Sin, and that's the episode where he turns the child over to the ex-Empire people, and he knows that they're shady. There's a scene where he's collected his bounty, he's got his reward, he's got basically everything he's ever wanted. And he's climbing back into his ship, and he sits down, and he reaches for one of the levers that he has to pull to start the thing. And the little gear shift knob at the top is missing because the child,
that's the one the baby liked to play with.
He liked to play with it, and he took it off, and he gave it to the kid to play with at one point, and it was missing. And this whole scene is probably a minute long. I can't even say. And the actor says not a word. His face is
he's wearing a helmet.
He's wearing a helmet. His face is completely covered, and through nothing but body language, you can feel the regret and the second guessing and the misgivings just pouring off of him. And it's so
just
well
from
done.
His body language.
And then and then you see he puts his hand down and he thinks, and then he starts shutting everything down. And all of a sudden his movements are snappy and it's clear. He's made a decision. He knows what he's doing. He's got a plan, and it goes for it. And it's just so beautiful as a storytelling moment.
So since you brought it up, I'll throw in this tidbit. Did you know that Pedro Pascal, who plays Din Djarin, or however you say his name,
Mando, he plays Mando,
started his career in Game of Thrones?
Really?
Yeah, he was Oberyn Martell.
He looks scruffy enough to be in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Well, props off to Pedro Pascal, because that guy. There are scenes where he's just walking down the street in a street full of aliens that are a foot taller than him, and he still portrays this character that nobody's going to even approach him because he's going to kill them where they stand.
Yeah, well, I hope you can give him a mulligan for Wonder Woman 1984, because he was really chewing the scenery as Maxwell Lord. Now, one of our listeners had requested that we add in additional film terminology, so I want to introduce a new one that I didn't know, and that's called showrunner. you have a director and you have a producer, but sometimes you have someone when you have like a long plot or something like that. Jon Favreau is the showrunner of The Mandalorian. He's directed, I think, most of the episodes, but he doesn't direct them all. He wrote a lot of it, but he doesn't write them all. But he's the authority over the story and plot of this thing. So rightfully, you've given him the credit for this thing.
So he is the guy. The buck stops with him. When other writers are working on an episode, they have to come get approval for this is what we want to do.
Yes.
Good. And it shows.
What would you say the mise-en-scène is of The Mandalorian?
So The Mandalorian, it feels like, and this is one of the things that's great about it, is it feels very classic Star Wars, and it feels like a space western.
Yes. Classic spaghetti western with Clint Eastwood, just kind of roaming aimlessly from town to town, sometimes doing good deeds, sometimes just looking out for himself.
Yeah, very, what is that, Guardians of the Galaxy? What are we going to do? Something bad? Something good? A little of both?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good example. So let me ask you this. Where would you put Mando on a D&D 3x3 alignment chart?
Lawful neutral. Easily.
Lawful neutral.
He's willing to do terrible things and break authority and do the rules, but he has his code of ethics that he lives by, and he will not break it.
Huh. Adhering to a code of ethics, you can still be lawful neutral?
So this is the thing. Everybody mixes up lawful with obeying the law. Lawful just means that you obey a set of codes.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be the law.
He kills, he lies. Sometimes he's ruthless, which I love. I love when movies don't tie their hands and allow their protagonist to be ruthless. Like that somehow, compromises them or something. What was the one where like he got mugged by some guys and like a Jawa took his jetpack?
Oh, it was, yes, that was, it was in second season, and he was ambushed by a couple of the other bounty hunters, and they said, listen, we know how a fight with you is going to go down, but we've got the jump on you. Let's not even give it a shot. Just give us the kid and we'll bail. And somebody tried to steal he had to give up the jetpack as one of the things. And it was hilarious because the guy's running off in the distance after he kills his two buddies, like hands down. And he hits a button on his wrist.
His remote control.
And the jetpack takes the dude off camera straight up. Oh, that was the greatest.
Yeah. Ruthless. Okay, so, there's a whole cast of characters, and they did some great things in the first season that they were starting to introduce this ensemble, and it felt like it was going to be like Guardians of the Galaxy. Like he was going to be the leader of this ragtag bunch, a la, Guardians of the Galaxy or Serenity.
It felt like for a minute he was going to assemble
Firefly.
some Scooby gang, and they were going to go off and have adventures, yeah.
And then it just didn't. Like, that just never happened. People started dying, and the mission changed, and everything went. I mean, they even had Taika Waititi voice one of the droids, and he did a freaking good job. Like, it was funny and interesting, and that guy got blown up. Nick Nolte was a character, and he only lasted like 2 episodes.
This is, again, good storytelling. We don't care so much about what's happening, so much as we care about the characters. And they've had so many really just good characters in this show. One of my favorites was the guy from the episode 1, the little short guy on the desert, not Tatooine, or what's it, Tatooine? I don't know. The not Tatooine planet. Was his name Queel or Queel? I don't know. He was a short guy. He rode the thing.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about, Nick Nolte.
Oh, that was Nick Nolte?
He was the I have spoken. He would say something once and then not repeat himself.
That is, honestly, that's so great. That character has more depth to it than a lot of action movie protagonists that have, AAA blockbuster budgets. Just the little quirk, the little thing where every once in a while, you're like, I'm done talking to you. He just goes, I have spoken, and then turns and walks off. Like,
yeah, and then that character does something selfless that causes his death, and for a minute, I thought they were just going to do the low rent TV show thing and just give him an out. But I think it gave the series a bit of heft and emotional weight that actions have consequences.
Yes, that's exactly it. This is why the last season of Game of Thrones went off the rails. You can only kill.
Yeah, they started bringing people back from the dead.
You can only kill Jon Snow so many times before I stop caring about him. This character died, real consequences, and he stayed dead, and that impacted the other characters in the show. Like consequences matter. So it feels everything is higher stakes in The Mandalorian than in any other show that I watch, because they have shown a willingness to kill characters and keep them dead.
Yeah, and that's important. Yeah, there is a high cost to losing characters that you've invested in, but you have to weigh it against the opportunity cost of creating a universe in which it feels like there's no consequences for any actions.
Yeah.
Nothing bad could ever happen. Another one like that for me was when they blew up the Razor Crest. For a minute, it was starting to feel like the Millennium Falcon. We'd spent so much time in it. You know, he'd done that one episode where he like flew across space with like, I don't know, stapled up plastic wrap to keep the thing together or whatever.
There was like that fishing net holding the wing on at one point.
Yeah, and I thought, this is it. You know, this is our new Millennium Falcon. This thing's immortal. And then they freaking blew it up, and now it's gone. And
I actually have that in my notes. It's about time somebody in Star Wars realized that you can blow up spaceships when they're still parked on the ground from orbit. It's like, oh no, he's getting in his spaceship and he's going to get away. Well, hang on a second. Is he leaving yet? Well, no, he hasn't left yet. Do we have big cannons on this ship? Well, we do have big cannons. Well, why don't we point them down and shoot at stuff that's not moving yet?
Yeah, easy. We have modern technology. We can see it, we can aim at it, and we can calculate the physics. Simple.
Sir, that's a great idea, and that's why they put you in charge.
So, another quote that's famous from The Mandalorian is, "This is the way," which you've said to me several times just in casual conversation. When you were wearing your Mandalorian battle armor or whatever, how's the visibility in that thing?
So mine actually was pretty good because I only had one layer of the semi-translucent material, but apparently the previous iterations of the other helmets for my kids and my wife were very much thicker, and they couldn't see anything. We ended up...
I'm talking about, like, if you have the slit aligned with your eyes, does it limit your peripheral or field of vision or anything significantly?
Oh, you're not asking me about specifically the costumes.
No, I'm talking about, like...
The how it looks.
Yeah.
So... I mean, it was fine. It was a little constraining. Like, I did have to turn my head a lot to see peripheral vision. But I always assumed about Mandalorian helmets that there's some kind of augmentation to it. Like, it's Star Wars. There's
not just that you're concealing your identity. It actually gives you a benefit instead of just a drawback.
Well, he has that thing where they have had a couple episodes where he hits the buttons and they show, he gets like the Predator vision where he's looking around. And his vision is never constrained at all when he's doing that. And so I always presume that the inside of the helmet has some kind of futuristic display that is bigger than just the slit.
Yeah, but they don't really go there, do they?
Well,
it's just to conceal his identity.
And protect his head and give him the night vision.
And make it hard to eat.
And let...
give people reasons to tease him.
And Boba Fett can aim the missile with it, with his little rangefinder.
Oh. Yeah, so there's a lot that they do in the way of lore here. The ending of Return of the Jedi was so satisfying that there wasn't really... You didn't sit around wondering, like, what happens next. It was very much they lived happily ever after.
Yes.
You know, Han and Leia were together. Luke was crowned the hero. Even the ghosts were all hugging. You know, it was just everything was good. The Empire's defeated. Everything's going to be fine. You didn't sit around wondering what happens next.
That is, yes, that is an excellent, wonderful thing about this show because it does so many little things to fill in the details for us as fans. For example, we see that there are still remnants of Imperial troops and
that's exactly
forces.
Where I was going.
I mean, yeah, and you can see that they're becoming more radical. Like the rank and file, once the Empire kind of dissolved, they probably went back to working a normal day job. But the really zealous ones insisting that, no, we are still Empire, we are still this. And you can see, like, there's a couple of pilots that commit suicide rather than give in to people that are clearly going to, like, just take what they want regardless of what you feel like.
They're also hinting at maybe the continuation of usage of the dark side of the Force, although they've been very light touch about that.
Yeah, and that's like we get hints about this is why they're pursuing the child because he is very Force sensitive. And so we can see this transition into kind of the First Order thing where we're getting this very radicalized, very smaller, but very much more zealous.
There's a big gap in the timeline between, the Return of the Jedi and the Force Awakens, though, and so there's a lot they can do here.
Right. Well, this is not just the other thing that this series does is that we're so used to watching the stars of this universe, like you said. We have, Luke Skywalker, and even in the prequels, we have Anakin and Obi-Wan.
All of the big hitters in the Jedi Council.
Yes. We're so used to them just going through things like stormtroopers like they're jokes. And then we get into this show, and stormtroopers are legit. Like we are afraid of stormtroopers.
Problem.
In a couple episodes, X-wings show up, and when the X-wings show up, like the tone shifts. Like, holy crap, this is legitimate military hardware shooting at my basically what is a car for everybody else in the universe. But like, there was that episode where like this guy says like, "Oh, release the gunship," and it was just like a ship with guns on it, and then 2 X-wings showed up and completely wrecked everything that they were going to do in seconds.
Yeah, he had to like crash and hide underneath a glacier to just not get completely obliterated by the X-wing.
So this is the thing is the Star Wars movies. We're looking at like the top tier guys, and like everything below them feels like fodder, feels like the minions we talked about before.
Yeah,
we're really like the Mando. Mando he's at the peak of his game, but he's still in that like AAA ball. Like, he's not at the top of his game. He's
not a big hitter.
He's intimidated by X-Wing fighters, by TIE fighters. The couple of times we see TIE fighters, the same thing. This is terrifying. They have a TIE fighter. We need to really consider what we're doing here.
So then let me ask you this. Do you think Boba Fett was that top tier? Or is it just he happened to get the bounty to bring back Luke or Han?
I think Boba Fett, honestly, like if we're looking at across the board for Star Wars, Boba Fett was at the level that Mando was at. Like, he was AAA, like, getting scouted for being top tier.
But he got called up to the big leagues because they needed a bounty hunter to track down Han Solo.
Yes, and he died kind of like a no-name character in Return of the Jedi. Like, somebody, like, he got hit, like, Luke, like, he flew at Luke for 4 seconds, and Luke hit his jetpack, and he fell into the Sarlacc.
No, you're right. You're right. And Luke outclassed him even when he was...
This is the same thing.
Disadvantage.
Now, I will say, this was a scene in the prequels I appreciated because Jango Fett suffered the same fate. Jango Fett thought he was top tier, and he came at Mace Windu with his 2 blaster pistols, and Mace Windu
just got decapitated
in like a second. Yeah. They were trying to try to wrestle above their weight class, basically, and they were done.
That's an interesting point you're making that I think when you ratchet the power level up to the maximum, then that's when you end up places like, well, what do we do next? I don't know. The Emperor shocks an entire fleet of Star Destroyers.
It's power creep in a movie. Like if your protagonists aren't challenged by the antagonist, then there's no conflict. So you have to have your...
But when you bring the power level back down, it allows you to have a conflict over a thing like some rhino-looking thing charging at you. Like, that's a life-threatening event. How are we going to solve the problem?
And you know what? That scene felt like it had more emotional and storytelling consequences than Mace Windu cutting Jango Fett's head off.
Yeah. What about the Darksaber? Talk about that as an artifact.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought this up because this is an aspect of season... No, actually, no. It started in season 1, but like this show has made a deliberate decision to make a lot of the Clone Wars cartoons that were on Cartoon Network for years and years. It's making them canon.
Have you? Okay, so I don't think there's any dispute over the fact that those cartoons are canon. Have you watched them all?
I've not watched all of them. I've not watched the Star Wars Rebels, but I've watched most of the Clone Wars cartoons twice.
So the Clone Wars didn't really have a satisfying end, and part of the rise of Disney Plus is that they've continued it. So there are new episodes being released.
Of the Clone Wars?
Yes.
Well, that's the Stormtrooper ones with the... I've seen previews for it, and I'm going to watch it. But those... I maintain, like, those cartoons are...
I haven't watched any of them.
Oh, the Clone Wars cartoons are better than the prequels, frankly. The characters in the development is way better. It's more... well thought out. The arcs make more sense.
Check it out.
It's really good. But
I'm sure it's all on Disney Plus.
They go a lot into the history of the Mandalorians with Bo-Katan and the Darksaber and like that whole history. Like, so the Darksaber as an artifact is a thing that is traditionally held by the leader of the Mandalorians.
Okay. So they established that in those cartoons.
Yes. At the time, the leader of the Mandalorians had the Darksaber.
Okay, because I had a moment that I have sometimes when I recognize, like you and I have talked at times about our fandom and where we fall on the fan spectrum, and we tend to be somewhere towards the middle instead of the far end of it. And this is definitely one of those moments where I knew I had to demote myself a level. When in the end of season 1, when you see I can't remember his name,
Moff Gideon, I think.
Moff Gideon holding the Darksaber. I could tell they wanted me to recognize it, and I didn't. And I was like, crap, I'm not as big of a fan as I thought I was.
That what that scene did for me was when the Darksaber cut out of that ship and he climbed out of it, it made me realize that, oh, they're taking all of the canon of the Clone Wars cartoons, and that happened. This is real. This is going to be live action and a movie now. Which is, and then we met Bo-Katan with her trademark little thing that she wears on her face. That's wonderful that there is an heir to the throne of Mandalore that is still out there being scrappy and trying to bring her people back together. What really, my wife will attest that I squealed like a 12-year-old schoolgirl when they said, "Oh, go find the Jedi named Ahsoka Tano," and like the sound that came out of me, Ben, was something like "Yee!" Like I can't even redo it. I was just so giddily happy about that.
Yeah, so now we start having Jedi do cameo. We're hinting at the existence of the dark side. And yeah, it starts to feel familiar and fresh at the same time.
And what's great, another thing that they did really well in this is they made us realize, because again, we as viewers are so focused on the top hitters and the Jedi Council and all that Jedi were very rare in the galaxy. Yeah. There were not that many of them on the scale of all the people that lived out there. And so,
right, he went to like 3 planets trying to find one.
Well, and they have been wiped out almost completely at this point. But the fact that he had no concept of what the Force even was. This little kid put his hand out, closed his eyes, and lifted the rhino off the ground, and he had no clue what was happening.
Yeah, I like that. It wasn't like, oh, he's using the Force. They didn't even use it. No one uses that terminology as far as I remember.
I mean, we have this scene with Han Solo in the opening movie. Oh, this all-seeing Force that exists in the universe. Like, I don't believe in that. Like, this is the actual perception of most people that live in the Star Wars universe, is that the Force is some fairy tale nonsense.
Or they're not even aware of it and don't know what to call it.
Yes. And it's so removed from their normal day-to-day life that it doesn't even have a word.
So they've kind of got a mid-level budget, and they occasionally use it on really cool things, like the convoy attack where they were blowing up all the cars, or the dragon hunt where they were trying to kill those creepy worm things in the cave, or the giant spiders in the ice cave. I mean, there's some really interesting moments in this AAA ball. There's still home runs and no hitters.
Yeah. It's still good to watch and still interesting, and it's still very, very Star Wars. And these shows feel more Star Wars than a lot of the latest movies that we've been getting.
Yeah, but not every episode's a home run. I mean, sometimes I was just like, meh, okay.
Yeah, the one we're talking about where they get lost in the ice cave with the spiders.
Yeah,
I thought they were done for. And then it's one of the few...
Right, then the X-Wing pilots show up and save them.
This is one of the few nitpicks I have, is the X-Wing pilots show up and save them, which I'm okay with until they let them go. Like, why did you guys fly all the way down here and shoot up all these spiders just to give me a stern lecture and then fly back off? That seems like a lot of work. Like, I was fully expecting them to haul him off to prison, and that's where the story was going to go, but they just let him go with a warning. Cops don't chase you down the freeway for hours and then find you after you've been hiding for 2 days.
So they can give you a
stern lecture and a warning. That's not how that works.
Yeah. So they bring in a lot of A-list talent here. I guess this universe has just earned its privilege that they can bring in people like Bill Burr and Timothy Oliphant and
this is
Giancarlo Esposito.
This is kind of like being called to be a Bond girl. I mean, yeah, you're probably going to be in a degrading type of role, but it's just so prestigious. How can you turn it down?
Yeah. And they have some slow burners, that characters that are just kind of weaving in and out of his life, sometimes by circumstance and sometimes by choice, like Cara Dune, played by MMA fighter Gina Carino. And they're developing her character, but they're not in a hurry about it. They're taking their time.
She is, I think, going to be one of the stars of Marshals. They have already 6 shows that they're going to spin off of this one. I think she's going to be one of the...
Yeah, so there's another one called, that named after, oh, geez. I knew it until I tried to say it.
Yeah, Ben's got to look things up.
Boba Fett.
Boba Fett, okay.
So there's going to be a Boba Fett spinoff. There's one from one of the Bothan spies from Rogue One. That one was also on the list. I got a graphic here, but it's hard to read because it's kind of small.
Link in the show notes, everybody. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of shows that spin off of this one. The person you brought up, I can't remember her name. The MMA fighter lady.
Cara Dune.
Cara Dune. Can I just say that I very much appreciate a show that has a female character that is competent and not a love interest.
Ex-rebel shock trooper turned mayor.
Is it mayor or just marshal? Like she's kind of
the
law. But like the idea is that
I'm the law around these parts.
Well, it's 2021 and it's surprising, which is ridiculous. It's surprising that we get a supporting character of the opposite gender that is not a romance interest. That they can just be competent and be in the universe, and they don't have to be somebody that we're going to date. There's no will they, won't they. They're just friends. And I don't know. I just very much appreciate that.
The Book of Boba Fett. That's what that other spinoff's called. So let's talk about the themes that are recurring, because there's some interesting ones. You talked about his adherence to a code of ethics. That's definitely one. Another is friendship, but it's not kind of like overt in your face friendship. It's just like do something generous for someone and without the expectation of receiving something in return, and maybe at some point in the future they have a time to pay you back. I think that's a good example with Bill Burr's character, where they like went on this heist with a bunch of ex-cons that all double-crossed each other, but because he wasn't vindictive in return, he ended up gaining a friend out of it.
Yeah. It's a friend asks you for help, you help them. Like that's just what it comes down to.
But I think one of the biggest themes that I find kind of resonates with me is fatherhood.
Just the taking responsibility for the development of another life.
Yeah. Just it doesn't change him a lot, but it definitely has a positive impact on him. It's kind of very unexpected. He's not the kind of guy that was like, next month I think I'd like to be a father.
Well, and I think that's the genius of they're telling the progression of the character that is Mando, because looking back, like I watched the first season again, and when you see him at the first couple episodes, he is very crass and very short and I just want another job. Just give me the next job. I'm going to go get the guy. I'll bring it back. I get paid. This is what I do. This is my life. And then the child comes into his life and it changes. Like he has direction. He has purpose. Here's the plan. This is the next thing that I have to do.
Would you say it moved him on the alignment chart?
In what sense?
In the sense that he went from like true neutral to lawful neutral?
No.
Or lawful neutral to lawful good?
So first of all, everybody can be everything on the chart at any time.
I get it, but this is pretty significant because you talked about how before he was just, he was following his code, but his driving force was collecting bounties so that he could generate enough revenue to upgrade his armor.
So yeah, I could see an argument be made that by accepting the child, that he could have moved from lawful neutral to lawful.
He went to where he was willing to sacrifice his armor that he worked for, that had been the only thing that was driving him before, to now being willing to prioritize the child above all of that.
I think you're putting way too much emphasis on the armor. The armor was a fringe benefit. Like it was just an unforeseen.
Is it just this vague getting money for money's sake?
No, he was but you saw him when he got the money. What the first thing is he did? He walked down to his secret underground bunker. He gave it up and he said, "This much for the foundlings, as it should be." Like he's given it all back to his people.
Okay.
He was being tithed on that Beskar pretty hard, Ben. To put it in parlance that you might get better.
Yeah, well, okay, so it's a spaghetti western, and it feels like that sometimes. Just this loner roaming from town to town and come into the local saloon and see what's going on. And...
I love the episodes that go full western, like the one where he met the guy that bought Boba Fett's armor or whatever, and they were standing there like they were going to like draw 6-shooters on each other. It was great.
Yeah. Or the one where he went to the town where the locals were being terrorized by the local warlord, and he helped mobilize them and get them ready for a shootout so that they could stop the
That's another scene where those
felt very Western.
ATSTs, the two-legged walkers, like we see them in movies,
felt like a big problem.
Like, oh, those are whatever they are. But in that show,
we just need a couple of Ewoks.
Yeah, in that show, it's like they have one that's 40 years old and run down, barely working, but there's no way. There's no way we can do anything about it. We're out of here.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh? You're right. Well, all right. What do you feel like the magic system of the Mandalorian is?
So it's complicated because there's multiple systems that are overlapping. There's the future technology, and then there's the Force that we're talking about. There's the sci-fi aspect, and then there's the magical aspect. So what do you want to talk about first?
Well, is this like The Nightmare Before Christmas, where the magic, such as it exists, is kind of irrelevant, and it's not really about that? It's about a man having a midlife crisis?
Well, that is absolutely holds true in this show. This show is not about the Force. It's not about the technology. That all exists to tell a story about characters that we care about, which is why it succeeds where other movies fail. It's not
I feel like it's going to start playing a bigger and bigger part as this goes on, though.
Well, we don't know. The child went off at the end of it. Spoilers, everybody. The end of season 2, the child went off with Luke Skywalker. Are we following the child, or are we following the Mandalorian?
We're following the Mandalorian. How big of a role do you think the child will play from here on out? You think we'll ever see it again? Grogu.
So, of course, I want to see Grogu again, but I don't think we should. If the story's going to stay true, then it's going to follow our Mando character, who is now with, he's lost his.
No, I think they've successfully set them up for some point in the future when we'll need a rescue, and Grogu will come to the rescue, and it will feel earned.
Maybe
out of loyalty to Mando.
I could see that from a long term perspective. This is not happening. Season 3, episode 2. We're talking long, way down the line.
Right.
Maybe, but I don't know. I'm very interested to see what happens in season 3 because I feel like the driving plot point of this whole thing was protect the child, keep him safe, and now he's as safe as he's gonna get. So now what does Mando do?
Okay, so I asked you about the whole magic system, but let's constrain it just to the final episode of season 2. So there's really one main thing going on here, and that's that he ended up needing allies to help rescue the child from Moff Gideon, and so he teams up with these other Mandalorians that he doesn't necessarily feel aligned with and doesn't necessarily trust. They've got their own goals. They're not telling him what those are. He's got his own goals, which he's been very clear about, and it makes for tenuous allies at the moment.
Yeah, kind of the enemy of my enemy type of situation going on.
Yeah. So they storm the ship, and she says kind of cryptically to him, you go get the child, leave Moff Gideon to me. But what she doesn't say is, because he has the Darksaber and I have to be the one to get it.
You can only earn the Darksaber through ritualized combat or by defeating your opponent.
So this is what I'm keying in on as the magic system. That's the rule. If you believe that rule, then that's what generates the conflict.
Well, that's not the rule. That's just the code of ethics. I'm sorry, that's not the magic system. That's just kind of the ethics system. Which is, I find this very interesting because they were making fun of him in a previous episode for being some super zealous offshoot of the Mandalorian
sticking
culture.
To his rules of not taking his helmet off.
Right, and they're like, what are you, you're one of those Mandalorians. No, you can take your helmet off whenever you want to. And then now on the flip side, it's like, no, I have to earn the saber. This is the only way that I can get it. Yeah,
you're right. There is a bit of an inconsistency, but doesn't any belief system have those things where you say you're not willing to compromise that make it seem like you would never compromise, but there's always something you're willing to compromise on?
Of course.
We're willing to take our helmets off, but we won't let you hand us the sword.
While we're talking about the helmets off, I think Pedro Pascal did a fantastic job of the one episode where he had his helmet off for any length of time. It just, like, you could feel he was super uncomfortable. Like, he wanted to put that helmet back on, like, right now. Like, he just didn't even know how to act with that on.
Yeah, interesting. So then, talk about, you were talking earlier about finding out that one of your favorite Jedis was in it. How did you feel when they'd established how dangerous these death robots were and that they're coming at them relentlessly and it's all over? Moff Gideon is one. And then Deus Ex Machina, an X-Wing starts flying up.
So, interestingly, I didn't feel terrible about it because most of the plot of season 2 was them trying to find a Jedi to mentor Grogu.
Right. Yes, I agree with you. They earned it. They kind of sent the call out there into the void, and we were waiting for an answer. And this was the answer at the moment they needed it most.
Yes, we had a whole episode of Grogu like broadcasting into the ether, "Hey, I need a teacher." And so it's not like Luke came out of nowhere.
Did you know when the X-Wing showed up? Did you guess what the ending was? I didn't.
I did not guess it was going to be Luke. No, I did not think it was going to be Luke.
I just figured some random Jedi.
Yes, yeah, that is just going to be some random. I wanted it so badly to be Ahsoka.
This goes against something I said earlier, and I'm wondering why. I was saying, why does it always have to be about the Skywalkers? And yet here it was about the Skywalkers, and I was satisfied with it. Well, and
this, I think it felt right, and it felt okay, because Ahsoka kind of set us up as, first of all, there aren't many Jedi left in the universe. Like, they all got wiped out, Order 66. There haven't been any since. And second is, we know from both the original trilogy and the prequels that Luke's goal and his task now that he's defeated the Empire is to rebuild the Jedi Academy. Like, we know that was going to be his driving purpose in his existence in this Star Wars universe.
So you wonder why Ahsoka was sticking to the Yoda dogma of too old to begin the training.
No. So, all right, I have more knowledge about Ahsoka because I've watched all these shows. Ahsoka is a soldier. She's not a teacher. Like, she is out there getting stuff done. She's fighting the fight. Like, there was she's not even actually technically a Jedi. She got far in her apprenticeship, and then she was brought up on charges for some bogus thing that, like, everybody knew she didn't do it, but the Jedi Council let her go to trial anyway, and it looked like she was going to get convicted. And when they didn't do anything, eventually it came out that she was innocent, and then she got off the charges. But she basically threw down in front of the entire Jedi Council, was like, "You all knew I was innocent, and you did nothing. Screw this, I'm out." And she left. She is she's very much act before talking.
So we knew it wasn't going to be her. So we knew there was someone else coming. We didn't think the X-Wing showing up was just some random, rebel officer or something like that. We were figuring Jedi. These death robots are coming. They've already proven to us that they're relentless and that Mando barely defeated one of them, let alone the dozen or whatever that are coming their way.
They had the 18-inch steel doors that were shut, and the robots decided to punch their way through it, which I thought was ridiculous, but they were going to do it.
Yeah, so then we recreate this scene that happened in reverse in Rogue One that was right at the end of Rogue One, where Darth Vader's on board the ship, just walking down the hallway, kicking butt and taking names, and it was just so awesome. And it was the exact same moment with Luke Skywalker coming onto that ship and just completely wrecking, and it was awesome.
Rogue One was a storytelling mess, but that scene saves the whole movie in my mind.
In mine too.
You always think about the prequels, like, oh, Darth Vader can barely move. How is he a threat? And then you see him walking calmly down a hallway full of people trying to kill him, and he's just coming, inexorable, like a boulder. There's nothing you can do about it. This is your end.
Yeah. And now, like father, like son, Luke Skywalker comes on board and does it. He defeats all the robots, comes onto the bridge, and we kind of have the culmination of season 2, the end of the second act. And after 5.5 hours, we've introduced Grogu, we found out that we need to help him, and now we've helped him, and we've kind of closed that act, and we're ready to move on to some new part of the story with the Mandalorian.
Which, I don't know where that's going to go. I hope it stays at this level because it's been great. And I want to emphasize, for me, this journey has been so good because of the characters, because of we can see the changes and the development of, like, how many times in the second season to be like, "Hey, we need your help." Be like, "I'm not helping you guys. They took the kid." And then there's this pause where it's like, "Oh crap." And I mean,
everybody likes
I mean, yeah. Mando's got this weird alien kid, but that's his thing, and the kid's cool, so I gotta help the kid. I don't know. I felt that happen more than once.
So in Toy Story 2, there was this fantastic throwaway line when tour guide Barbie was giving them a tour and she's doing like the tour guide thing. And she's like, back in 2001, short-sighted retailers failed to stock store shelves with enough toys to meet holiday demand. Wow, if there was ever a ball drop by Disney, it was releasing this thing on Disney Plus and not already having the Yoda toys ready to go.
Now, hang on a second, mister.
I know we talked about this on the podcast. They deliberately didn't build the toys so that it would hide the surprise of the baby. I don't know if it was worth it.
All right, so first of all, it was 100% totally worth it and an excellent call. Like, this is just another example of the reason that this series is going so right is because the person that's in charge cares more about the story, cares more about the emotional impact of that character than he does about the merchandising.
Can they keep winning battles like that? Does Disney corporate just look at that as a failure to make more money, and next time the middle management will have more influence over
Absolutely not, because what they did was before that product was even put into production, they drove the demand for it so freaking high that they could put an $80 price tag on just anything, and people would eat it up.
Maybe. Because I just went to Disneyland, and those things are all over the place now.
And they're all probably really expensive, aren't they?
I think the prices flattened out and normalized. It was really just like right before Christmas that year. So while we're talking about that kind of thing, maybe in the future this will be obvious, but we're at a time where we're seeing a major transition in the way people consume narrative media or media in general. Just similar to probably what happened 20 years ago when we transitioned from CDs to MP3s. It was huge. And it was so huge, it just changed. It changed what we carry. It changed the way we consume things. It changed businesses. Companies went bankrupt. New companies popped up out of nowhere. We're seeing that right now with the transition from like broadcast and cable television to streaming media. And I don't think it's saying too much it's not overstating the case to say that basically almost the entire success of Disney Plus's launch as a streaming media service was hinging on the success of this property.
So when I bought Disney Plus, it was for two reasons. One is because I discovered that it has the entire Disney back catalog of classic animated movies. I have kids. Of course I'm going to get Disney Plus because I have to have all of these movies at my fingertips.
Now I don't got to go digging through that stupid DVD collection.
I don't have to wait for them to it came out of the vault and now it's $45. No, they're just there. I can just get the movies that I need to watch.
Okay, what's the other?
And the other, that's the kids. And then for me, dude, Mandalorian, come on. You saw all those teaser images of a dude in full head-to-toe a Boba Fett-style armor? Oh.
Yeah. I was definitely on board, ready to give it a chance.
I was ready for Star Wars to break my heart again with its god-awfulness. And I was so delightfully surprised when The Mandalorian turned out to be this labor of love that is everything that I've wanted from Star Wars for so long.
And it didn't. So here we are. We've the Bad at Magic podcast wholeheartedly recommends The Mandalorian and hopes they continue on for many seasons doing the same thing they've done.
I will watch it multiple times. I've watched season 1 twice. I will watch season 2 again. We will, when the season 3 comes out, we will watch from the beginning again, just to make sure we know every little detail. Listeners, if you're hearing my voice now, thank you very much for sticking with us all the way to the end. If you like what we do, please recommend us to a friend.